what it is.
99.9 Punk World Radio FM. You already know what time it is. And right here, we actually are joined by a member of one of my favorite all-time bands. I listened to them growing up, and I still listen to them today. We actually have Robb of Juno Award-nominated band, multi-platinum. We can go through the list of certifications and awards. But right here, we got Robb of Stereos on Facebook, YouTube, and, of course, the radio station Airways, man. How are you doing this evening?
We are doing awesome. How the hell are you doing?
Oh man, doing pretty good down here in Ontario, despite the really shitty weather we have going on today. It's raining, it's just gloomy. Hoping tomorrow we actually get the sun and that hot weather back, man, because it is pretty well summer, and I need the beach, man. I
Summer
literally am sick
Toronto?
of rain.
I was in Toronto until Monday, or I came home Sunday, and it was usually when I go out there, it's hotter than here. So I'm actually in Edmonton right now, and it usually is a lot shittier here, but we were like plus 30, and when I was out in Toronto, it was like kind of shitty compared to what I'm used to out there.
I gotta say, I definitely agree, man. I was in Toronto Saturday, and then I posted up in a hotel, then went to Niagara Falls for Comic-Con and drove 5.5 hours back to Prescott. So I definitely know what you mean just by the weather, man. The Toronto weather was crappy this past weekend, man.
I know, it's the first time we lived out there for a few years, and I had never felt humidity before. Like I'm from the West, right? So like plus 20, I know what I'm getting. That's plus 20, or like I guess that's like 68-ish for my American friends. But I got up to Toronto, and I was like, yeah, humidity is just simply a word to me. And when they put us in this house in Scarborough, no AC, I died, man. I died. I was like, I can't do this. I can't physically exist with this. This is like whatever the hell humidity was before I knew what it was.
Yeah, it's pretty much we get like California weather out here in Ontario, and I don't mean California in January. I mean like California in August.
Yeah, hell yeah. Yeah, I got to spend some time down there too. I love that spot.
See, I've never been to California, man, but I've heard some amazing stories, and I gotta get out there at some point just for a little vacation, man.
Oh man, it's the birthplace of like everything that's ever been like cool to me. You know, skateboarding. Like I loved West Coast hip hop, West Coast punk rock, and oh no, God bless the West, man. I love Ontario though. It'll always have a special place in my heart, man.
Oh man, I've always wanted to go to Sunset Boulevard with the windows down, just blare some punk rock while
Yeah,
you're driving down the road,
dude,
and also
and
skateboard at Venice Beach, man. You need to skateboard in Venice.
Oh, and I've done it. I've done both, man. And like it's funny because you get down to Sunset, and like not only with the punk rock stuff, like I was a huge like 80s hair metal guy too, right? And you see these spots and you're thinking, oh my God, like that's where like Nikki Sixx would be walking down in heels. And when I lived down there, I was right by the LA Greyhound station, and I'd look at it, and like so back in like the 80s and 90s, like that's where you get, let's say you're from Nebraska and you're trying to like do that Hollywood dream, you get dropped off there. So I'm looking at this bus stop, I'm thinking, man, like Axl Rose, like how many people that are my heroes have been dropped off at this stop with just nothing other than like a dream. But the skateboarding there, like I love skateboarding. It's still like I'm almost 40 years old, and it's a massive part of my life. And you look everywhere, and you'll recognize it from like your favorite movies. Like every handrail you see is something you've seen Nigel do or Muska back in the day. It's just awesome.
And also, man, just going back to like speaking of humble beginnings and getting off the bus and just starting from scratch, in the early to mid 2000s, the Stereos were actually formed. I was wondering if you can actually just tell us the origin story behind this iconic Canadian band, and of course, how did yourself, Robb, actually meet the other members?
Yeah, so you chose the right guy. So I'm kind of like the glue that found everybody. Basically we had in Edmonton, we had like this is back in 2002, like we had a really cool local music scene. It was like kind of where I found like a lot of the good punk rock, a lot of the good like when I was learning hardcore music and all that. And we had this message board when all like this is in the MySpace days, and it was called In Decline. And I was jamming in like high school bands, and I grew up loving skateboarding and punk rock, so I was a big part of that scene. And I was trying to start something that kind of sounded like Strung Out meets like AFI, I guess, like specifically those two. And I put this little ad up because the kids I was jamming with in Edmonton, they just weren't taking it seriously. And I was like, look, like we can do this if we want to. I'll sleep on a band floor. I'll do whatever. I just knew I was going to do it. I just knew when I found the right combination of guys, it'd be good. So I put this ad up, like classic, like guitar player, like, like looking for like influences like Taking Back Sunday and this and this and this. And the guy that reached out to me is actually our other guitar player now, Miles, who was my first friend. in that scene. So we would ride like bikes to each other's house and like jam and jam and jam. And we started this band that was like kind of like that Silverstein kind of vibe, like sing a bit, scream a bit when that stuff was blowing up. And we ended up, Miles got stolen into this other band that was just like kind of like a Jimmy Eat World kind of vibe. And I was pissed. I was like, well, that was I'm in grade 11 at this point, going into grade 12. And I was so mad that I lost this guy that I had really good guitar chemistry with. But he was a beauty, and he got me in that band. And Dan, who was an old member of Stereos, was in that as well. And I ended up leaving grade 12. And we would go down to California, tour all, like before I was even turned 18, I had toured that classic, like every state in America, playing all the venues I wanted to play, playing to 0 people because we were horrible, but just being there with the boys is just the best. And I had hit all the states, and I knew that was what I was going to do for life. Fun fact though, after a Warped Tour that year, I got kicked out of the band just for being like a sketchy little kid that like I had no job because I dropped out. I was always the young guy. So I couldn't afford like van payments and like all this other stuff. But it ended up being the best thing ever. I get kicked out by 2 guys that were part of Stereos down the road. I go get a job on like in Edmonton, like our big cool street, like is called White Ave. I get a job on White Ave selling Sean John suits. Okay. If you remember that, like, I don't know what the hell I'm doing in that world, but the manager of the store was Pat. So I meet Pat and I'm like, oh shit, this dude loves Strung Out, loves AFI, loves Rancid. And those were a big 3 for us. But he was also like kind of like into the Oilers and like hockey shit, which like I grew up with too. And it was really rare for me to find that vibe. So we start this like absolute hardcore screaming band, and it was kind of cool. And that was kind of the game plan. But we realized that we had like some talent, and we were kind of working on some like inner demons and shit. And we just had the idea of, as much as we love, like punk rock, all that stuff, we love pop. Like we love it. Like I love Mariah Carey. I grew up on all that 90s dance music was like my favorite thing ever. And I didn't see that like there was so much of that like fuck pop music or like this and this, or I don't know if I can swear. Sorry about that.
We're uncensored, man, so definitely swear it out.
Hell yeah. Okay, good. I was like, oh god. Yeah. So and we were like, well, let's write some choruses, let's keep our vibe in there. We're like, we come across as punk rock dudes, so we have that attitude. And then we started writing some more catchy style songs. And we brought Dan in because he had that same attitude. We brought Miles in, and Pat and myself. And that is the entity that became called Stand By Me that you see in that disband show we did. That's who we show up as before, legal issues of having a band name called Stand By Me. And then that ended up becoming Stereos. So as much as it looked like we were kind of like a reality show band, behind the scenes, we were DIY punk rock for like over like 10 years of touring around doing nothing.
And speaking of Stand By Me as well, I do know that you guys were also called Turn It Up as well. And then ultimately, third time's the charm, Stereo came into play. And now, boom, we all know who you guys are. But I have to ask, because I do know you said Stand By Me briefly was like legal issues and whatnot. But what ultimately made you guys decide to go from Turn It Up to Stereos? Was it legal stuff as well? Or did just Turn It Up just not really fit for you guys?
Well, when we were doing the show, like Stand By Me, I really like that name. I think in the back of all of our minds, we knew that we couldn't pull that off. It being like, I think Disney owns the rights to it. Plus it's like one of the biggest songs in the world. And no one's going to think of our band first when they hear that name. So I think for part of the show, they kind of threw that curveball at us saying like, okay, what's the name? Turn It Up. It's funny because Stand By Me kind of is part of a Rancid song too, and from The Clash, which is sick. Turn It Up is actually from there as well, from a Rancid song, and so is Stereos from Rancid. So there is this like these legit kind of tie-ins to like our punk roots. But we were in a meeting maybe 2 days before Summer Girl was supposed to like hit the radio, and the show was going to drop, and we didn't know what we were going to call ourselves after. Turn It Up wasn't the name. For what we believed in the project to be, it just wasn't the right thing. We were going to, if we want to do a little street punk band on the side, that would have been a great name for it. So we have this meeting, and on the whiteboard, we're just putting up horrible band names. Horrible. And this is the tail end of the, like when we had like Cobra Starship and like all the bands that like From Autumn to Ashes and all that shit. And I love all that stuff. So we had some pretty bad ones. Like we were about 2 seconds away from being called the City Kids. Neon Black, just some weird names. And then all of a sudden Stereos was kind of floating around, and we thought like there's no way that name can be available. it's wild to me that we have that name, Stereos. And as soon as we saw it, it just clicked. And then I can't believe it was ever not the major thing. But it was about 12 hours out from debuting, and we didn't know what we were going to be called. It was a fun little preview of the stress to come.
And I gotta say, I never actually knew that. I do know you guys had frequent band name changes. I didn't know that you guys actually were 24 to 48 hours out
Oh yeah,
from debuting and didn't know your name. And I have to
no
ask,
idea.
since we're on this topic, man, I am actually so intrigued. What other names were actually on that whiteboard that were potential band names?
Okay, City Kids, Hollywood Diamonds, Neon Black. Oh, Time Bomb, which is like a sick like punk name, which is another Rancid thing. Time Bomb, the Makeout, which was one of my first band name ideas. I think someone else I think I saw some like all these names I've seen used down the road, but it was a whole bunch of scene kid shit when we were trying to find that name. But then at the same time, you think of a name like Fallout Boy. Like I know that from The Simpsons, but it isn't that anymore. It's the band, and we were lucky enough to at that point have already been working with a bigger label like Universal, and so we had access to the room and we could kind of get the graphic up and see what it looked like. But there were some bad ideas. It had to be Stereos. It just had to be.
And for some reason, when you said Hollywood Diamonds, honestly, in a way, I think that would actually work. Because I know your logo,
Yeah,
especially during the beginning days of the very first debut album, you had a diamond within stereo. So I don't know. To me, that's why I'm picturing that logo blended instead of Stereos Hollywood Kids. But I gotta say,
yeah,
man, like I feel like that could have been a potential candidate. But Stereos,
yeah.
now that I've known you guys for so long as that, like seeing it change to Hollywood Kids, I don't think it would. I don't think it would pop.
No, I know man. Like you're right. That's the closest one it could have been, but thank God it wasn't.
Especially this day and age too. It sounds bad to say, longer band names, I notice they don't get the most exposure. I think it's just because people's attention spans are so far
Totally.
gone because of social media. I think Stereos is just like boom, it's a one word, it's like 6 or 7 letters, it's perfect.
I couldn't agree more. Like I had never in a million years. Like I always was. We were so calculated on everything we did. It's all we thought about. It's all we wanted to do. And all of us. The unique thing about us and what tied us in together is that before we even met each other individually, we were always the number one guy in our separate bands that cared the most, that wanted to practice the most. So when it was there, and I just never thought I'd be in a band called Stereos, and now I can't believe there was ever any other names.
And also, while we're still on the topic of this band names, and of course, this band, which is the Much Music series that actually came out October of 2009, I was wondering if you would actually just tell us a bit more about the show itself. And the one thing I was always wondering, was that show like scripted? Did they give you lines, or was it just like the cameras just following you during your day-to-day
Yeah.
process?
Let's say all of the above. And like, I mean, Much Music is so gone now that I guess I can just kind of say everything. But basically, like, we had already been in chats with Greg Norrie from Treble Charger, who was the guru on the show. We had been chatting to him, and we knew that he had, really found some 41, and we kind of thought we had gone through some very minor level stuff, but we knew that we had something special. We had been told enough by just some West Coast like smaller labels that, hey, this is a good product, and we knew we had more to offer and that Toronto was going to be the way to do that. So when Greg, by chance, found us on MySpace, oh, RIP MySpace, the glory days, we were really excited. I mean, I loved Treble Charger growing up, and we were really, really pumped. But I remember, and I think Pat just told this story when we were out in Toronto, so I'll make sure I get it right, but I'm pretty sure we were throwing the football around Edmonton. We all lived together in this really horrible house that honestly is like torn down now. No one should ever have to live there, but we all did, and we practiced there. Like Summer Girl was written there. I'll pay like homage to it every now and then, just a hole in the ground. But we were throwing the ball around, and Pat took a call, and it was Greg letting him know that he was going to be on this show, and he thought that'd be a really good opportunity for us to do it. So we were like, they said, look, it's going to be Ontario bands, and you guys are from Alberta, and we were like, look, we've been driving around playing. Like I've played El Paso, Texas 4 times before I turned 18. Like there's no such thing as distance. If you can get there on a road, we're going to get there. And we drove out, we did it. Had quickly realized that we had never had experience with being on camera, so we're really awkward. I watch the episode every now and then. Some people, I mean, a lot of people in my life have had to sit through it with me, and we're like innocent children in it. So the first half, we had maybe a little bit of a heads up of what the idea would be, but a lot of it is quite pretty, like, I would say as authentic as you could possibly be. So they'd be like, okay, you guys are going to a photo shoot. What we didn't know at the photo shoot is it was going to be like 50 girls in like lingerie around us. So you see those genuine things. Now the second half, so we were the third band they ever filmed, but they decided that we were going to be the season finale. So the second half we filmed after we had already moved out there, had already signed. So you see us on TV, like signing a contract after playing for Gene Simmons. Like, we were, yes, not the smartest kids, but we would never do that with like a lawyer present. So a lot of that stuff had taken place, but still, just being around someone like Gene Simmons, it's pretty authentic. I would almost everything you see that seems like drama is scripted. And now that I've told you, if you ever see it again, oh, it's bad. It's bad acting. Thank God we went music and not film, because it's bad. But I would say let's say 70% real, 30% something else, which has forever ruined reality TV for me.
See, I always thought about when I actually watched that show, whether it's just like, your guys' episode or previously, or just watching, just reality TV in general. I always said to myself, are those bands actually really fighting, or are they just, because you can watch some episodes and you sit back and you're like, holy shit, like this looks
Yeah.
legit. And then there's other episodes where you're like, why are you smiling while you're yelling? You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Stuff
totally,
like that, right?
totally. And like any emotional response, truthfully, was pretty legit. It's good we're chatting about it, because I just watched it again. There's just a couple things like where we pull up to this house they're giving us. Like, we had lived in that house for like 3 months already. And oh man, the acting is so, I know all of us could do such a better job now, but I'd say like for everything that happened, like it legit happened the way you see it, other than the fact that we had signed the contract before that surprise we got off stage. Here's a contract, which is sick. I mean, that's what I thought it would be like in the big leagues anyway.
And when you said as well a few moments ago how you had the opportunity to meet Gene Simmons of Kiss, I do know at the beginning of the interview you were speaking about being in California, looking at the bus stops and just seeing individuals like picturing like people like Nikki Sixx getting off, because obviously you have that rock and roll like background and you were a fan when you were a kid. Being there, as a young adult in the music industry at the very beginnings, being able to be in the same room as Gene Simmons, like, and also having to deal with being on camera at the exact same time, man. Like, what was actually going through your mind sitting there on camera with Gene Simmons?
It was wild, and it is in the show too. But he flew to Edmonton to see us play at like a local Edmonton bar, and I think that being in the limo with him in disband and then signing and stuff, that was exciting, because that to me is something I've been working to for the first 22 years of my life at that point. So that was incredible. However, when we first find out that he was coming to see us, that was as much of a surprise as it could be. Now, we, like, the five of us were wild. So when we heard there was going to be something going on in Edmonton, I don't know how we figured it out, but we had an idea that we had heard that he was trying to work with some Canada stuff, but it was still a shock. And I think about that show all the time, the first one in Edmonton, where he was just watching us. And you know how they say, like, you put an alter ego on or something, because even just thinking about it now, like, this is so many years removed where we've had the success. I think, like, I still feel the nerves of it. So I feel like we just knew what a big deal it was. I mean, we all felt sick to our stomach. But as soon as we went up there, we believed in the product so much that I didn't really think of anything again until afterwards. However, I will say one thing: not the strongest handshake I've ever experienced in my life.
I gotta say, that is actually surprising, but you were there, you experienced this, so I'm definitely gonna take your word.
I know, I might have been an off day, but for like a mogul of business like that, and you can see on Disband where he connects with me. I remember I was ready for like the grip of a python, and it I don't know, maybe he just didn't think that much of me on it, but it was nerve wracking. And it's like, it's the number one thing we got asked for a long time was, what was it like working with Gene Simmons? And it's one of those people that it's like A-list celebrity you see on TV so much that when they're in front of your face, it's hard to distinguish that it's reality.
And also as well, October 20th of 2009, you guys actually released your debut studio album, actually, that was actually, of course, self-titled, that actually reached number 3 on the Canadian album charts. I was wondering if you can actually just tell us the story behind this iconic album. And of course, what was it like actually working alongside Gavin Brown for the production side of this particular release?
Oh, for Gavin's a beauty, and had done so many albums that like I love Metric, and he had worked so intertwined with Metric, that to me it was a no-brainer to do it. We had the best time hanging out at his studio. That it felt like an authentic friendship that developed, and we'd hang out in LA down there. And to watch that mind at work was just fascinating. I loved every part of it. And the first part of the question you asked me was what, sorry?
Oh, just a story behind the album.
So the cool thing about that first album, and there's so many people when they go to it's Summer Girl, that's the lasting thing. But as time has gone on and music's gone on, you realize that we were really putting kind of all of our favorite, like Pat is a genius when it comes to writing this stuff, and I take pride in kind of feeding him music over the last like 20 years of our friendship, and then I see it in the music he writes. But we sound like one of those bands that maybe has worked with a whole bunch of other writers, but it's really from Pat's brain. So when he found Summer Girl, it was a joke song. We were like, when the auto-tune was coming out, and we didn't need auto-tune. And here's the thing with auto-tune, he's like, you got to know what you're doing to even use it, because it's going to take you to the closest note, right? So I feel like I'll always be kind of fighting the war on auto-tune. But once the Summer Girl thing took off, we just started seeing so much more than Hey Cupid and Throw Your Hands Up and Turn It Up. We did with Aaron, who became our drummer, and Jesse Colburn, who was from Closet Monster, Avril Lavigne. And it just was cool, man. And we were just like, we would show up and we'd be like, okay, yesterday we loved this Andrew WK song, and we loved this T.I. song, and oh man, like the guitars on this Chicks Dig It album. And we would just not follow the rules and put it all together. And then Pat started to develop this really cool kind of like hip hop influence into it. And I think about it all the time, because it's such a change from the first album to the second album. But we'll have people come up and show us tattoos of butterflies, and it's like, I remember the events that led to the writing of that song. Or some, a lot of, now that we're all getting older from that big time back then, people be like, when I hear Summer Girl, it takes me back to a certain time. And you kind of had mentioned some things off the bat with it, and that, to me, it's so wild knowing how much music means to me and my friends in the band, that we are now considered, we have that iconic Canadian song and a part of that history. And that first album is just so special because it's just exactly, it's our experiences of life to that point. It's just, it's almost like I have this physical CD copy of back when you could get that, of like my memories, and it happens to have been like a platinum album, so that's cool too.
And I honestly think that this album is absolutely unskippable. Maybe it's just because I grew up listening to it and whatnot.
Yeah.
I got it off the shelf when it first came out, but from Summer Girl to like She Only Likes Me When I'm Drunk to Turn It Up to Butterflies, it's just, you cannot skip a song. And if you skip the song, you're getting the hell out of my car. That's how it works.
If you had to skip one though, what are you skipping?
Oh God, you're putting me on the spot.
I know, you have to answer it too.
See, I would honestly say I would say Butterflies, but the reason why I love that song though. Let me finish though, Rob. I love that song, but if I'm in a depressive mood already, it's gonna it's gonna bring me down a little bit. So I will only skip that if I'm in like already a sad mood. You get what I mean? No, but other than that, man, the album is unskippable. And I mean, I know people that are watching this, they're going to be like, oh man, like, it's about time to kill the DJ. He said skip Butterflies. But I don't hate the song. It's just, if I'm already sad, you got to skip it.
I feel that way. And like, here's the thing. Because we've seen people with butterflies tattoos, that still means the world to us. I don't know why that song has been an inside joke in the band for so long. It's because you know what it is? I know the original bridge of it from the first demo that Pat ever sent me, and I'll never repeat it on air, but it was just awful. It's like, he's so good, and it was just awful. So when we're making fun of him, it's a go-to. However, this time around, in the shows we played in the last couple of years, we have a new version. We call it Butterflies 2.0. And it pleases the Butterfly fans, and it gives the people that'll skip it, it has a little something in there for you too.
And I gotta say as well, like when I say I skip that song, I also might just skip a song to get to another song that I like.
Oh hell yeah!
I always go back.
I think you get Hey Cupid after that too, and that's a great one.
Yeah, see what I mean? It's so like once you skip one, you can't skip another. Like if you do, it's like goddamn.
Yeah, that album is wild. The last song on it, Give You Up, underrated stereo song, hidden gem as we call it.
And the one thing I love about this album too is just the fact that you guys, like you said, you incorporated so many different music sounds. You had a little bit of hip hop in there, even Butterflies. It could also be an acoustic if you guys wanted to. I think, if
Yeah,
I'm not mistaken, one of your guys' releases includes an acoustic version of that song as well. So
yeah,
there's so many different genres of music just in one album that it's like, my God, man, like it's a musical masterpiece. And you don't get albums
yeah.
like that
That's
today
awesome.
either.
Yeah, yeah, hell yeah. Well, I think a lot of people get scared to leave their genre. And there's a couple of bigger bands that have never feared that I really like a band like Bring Me the Horizon that, was just kind of metalcore, like everyone sounded back then, but now they're working with anything. I saw Post Malone was at this hardcore band I love from California called Drain. He was at their show. So you're starting to see that we all, like, as we all kind of aged together, we came from those scenes. And I love seeing boundaries kind of broken down. So it's cool to think that we were doing it over 10 years ago. And I think even on our newest album, Cheap Thrills, that we put out last year, same kind of thing with our updated influences.
And while we're actually still on the topic of this amazing debut album, you guys also got nominated for Best Pop Album at the 2010 Juno Awards. I was wondering if you can actually just tell us a bit more about that particular night at the Junos. And of course, what was it like just seeing your guys' names up on that screen? Because I know that obviously the Junos, every Canadian knows that is pretty much like where
Yeah.
every single Canadian celebrity is actually going to be that night.
Yeah. And we got really lucky in that year they were in St. John's, Newfoundland, which is a spot I had always wanted to go. And like growing up out in the West here, like your idea of Canada is it's just it's Saskatchewan, playing hockey in Saskatchewan, going to Vancouver, and then hanging out in Edmonton or Calgary. But we had never, I'd never been east of. I mean, I'd been down to New York and stuff, but I'd never been east of Winnipeg in Canada. So we were lucky it was in a good location. But at that point we were on tour with Headley actually, and Boys Like Girls and Favorite Drive. And we were playing NHL arenas, so life was pretty. It was pretty wild checking all these. My goal was to literally just be on the Warped Tour. I never thought I'd play NHL arenas or get award nominations. So when the nominations came in, we saw we were in categories with like Bieber and the Arkells, who we were friends with at that point, but they were kind of like in the background of the pop scene, and they were kind of a cool rock band. So we all brought our family out there, and we had been on a pretty wild tour with Headley for a month leading up to it. So we were pretty tired, and your media schedule comes in, and I remember you'd get to your hotel room and you'd get 5 minutes of sleep before a CBC interview, or like Rob and Dan go over here, Miles goes over here, Pat goes over here, Aaron has an interview over there. And it was such a blur. And then all of a sudden you're at the event and it's everyone. It's Bieber, it's Drake. It for me, like I think Emily, the singer of Metric, is just so charismatic, and she's there. And then you just being able to be there with my mom was cool. I have a cool mom, so well, it was cool. And she's seeing April Wine or bands that she liked, and then all of a sudden, like Dallas Green is coming over to say hello, and it was pretty incredible. It's we had to present an award too, and at that point we had played some pretty big shows. But I remember it threw to us, and we announced the award that we announced. Metric ended up winning, so then we hugged them. They come on stage, and I've seen a couple shots of it since then. But I mean, our phones exploded afterwards. Probably like we had been on TV so much, and it was just like another step. And even though we lost to the Arkells, like that's awesome. The Arkells are wicked, and they were so nice to us that they deserved to win that. But that experience, like an even cooler part of it too. Well, I guess it's not a cool result from a bad thing. Is there was a huge. So that was 2010, and there was a big volcano that went off in Iceland in Reykjavik, and the ash messed up all the flights. So because Newfoundland is so far out there, no one could get out except there was a private plane that had like Scooter Braun, Drake, Bieber, and they got out. And then everybody else, like, so Canada's whole music scene was stuck partying on George Street for like a week. So you would go to like a little club, Deadmau5 is DJing. You go over here, like Carly Rae Jepsen is playing an acoustic set, and then we just all acted like teenagers for a week. My liver never recovered from that week, but it was the cool. It's one of my favorite memories of all time, and I've never got back to Newfoundland since, and I just cannot wait because man, it was another planet.
And speaking of your liver never recovering, man, at the end of the day, I think as well, you know what I mean? If you're going to kill yourself with alcohol abuse, I think that is definitely the time to do it, man, because at the end of the day,
Yeah,
you go from one, like you said, one bar, Carly Rae Jepsen, other bar, Dead Mouse. You don't know who's performing where, man. And at the end of the day,
yeah,
you gotta, if you're at a bar, you gotta drink. You can't drink
a
tap
lot of,
water.
and I can yeah, a lot of Jameson, and then like I can proudly say that a few of us are sober now, California sober, we'll call it, and forget we had a great time, but it was just time to dip out.
Especially when you get that age as well, it's like, okay, we know I'm not 19 anymore. I can't
Oh,
drink. I gotta slow her down.
oh man, I remember like I had it down to a science. Like it was your only responsibility was to get on the plane or onto the bus by a certain time, and like we got we got a little out of control at the end there, which is why a few of us don't do it anymore. But it oh god, I had a hell of a time. I had a hell of a time. But as you get older, and then I don't know, it's like one glass of wine, you feel it for 3 days afterwards. Whereas before it was like, God, give me 3 hours of sleep and I can do anything.
And also as well, I jump ahead of the timeline a little bit. On March 10th of 2019, you guys actually announced an amazing 10-year reunion show where also the very next show as well was also sold out. So both of them sold out shows. I was wondering what actually made you guys decide to part ways back in the day? And of course, what actually led you guys to actually coming back to reforming the Stereos and just going on this an amazing 2-event reunion tour?
Yeah, honestly, I really thought it would never ever come back. Near the end of, I would say 2012 or so, me and Pat and Dan, we started another band that was a little more kind of like Americana, like Gaslight Anthem kind of vibe. And we switched over to I knew Carly Rae Jepsen a little bit, and we had some relationship with people at the 604 record label in Vancouver, which is Chad Kroger's label. So we killed Stereos, put it to bed, and the plan was to be more rock and roll. And we think about this and talk about it all the time, and I think substance abuse for sure was getting a little bit out of control. We were fighting a lot. We felt a little, I guess, manipulated, and you know what, we just couldn't have handled it. Yeah, we were trying to break in the US, and we had been dropped from Def Jam, we had Interscope, we moonlighted a little bit with Akon, and it just nothing could work out. And we were starting to realize almost that we put the second album out a little bit too early, and we were taking there was a whole bunch of people in our ears, and we had lost what we had originally started it for. So we do the Vancouver thing out in Vancouver, record an album, and it just people want Summer Girl, they didn't want what we were doing. But for me, what I really think we had to go home, and I think we were taking it for granted, and we had to be humbled. And the 10 years that we spent at home, not 10, maybe like 7 or so, we all just did different things. I always have had a background in the fitness industry, so I've been a strength coach for a bit. So I kind of fell back on that, and I didn't even have a guitar for a while. I had it in the back of my mind that the 10-year anniversary, we should probably do something. And there was a gentleman in Toronto who was a big fan of ours, who is now a big player in the industry, called Andrew Valley. And he and our guitar player started chatting, our other guitar player, Miles. And we went out there to take some photos, Pat and I. And we just really vibed with the guy. And the plan was only just to play the Toronto show, and then if that went well, we'd do Edmonton, Toronto and Edmonton being kind of our homes. And it sold out. And as soon as we went on stage and felt that thing, like the backstage, when all the people in Toronto that were kind of our family came back out, I just knew like that we can't stop this. And Pat and I we had started a little local like punk rock hockey themed band out here, and we were just playing bars, and we just kind of looked at it and we're like, look, what are we doing here? So he started writing a bit, and then we made Sunset Gold, and we put that on the radio 2 weeks before COVID shut the world down. So it was like oh my god, we're back. We sold out Toronto, Edmonton, 2020, let's go. And then the world was like, absolutely not, and shut us down. And we had about another 2 years to sit and think about what we were going to do next, and if we were ever going to get the chance. But like a lot of artists and a lot of other bands, I think in that COVID shutdown, strange experience that we had, we realized what matters to us, and that is music and art, and we'll never let it go again.
And I gotta say, just going back as well, just to, when you guys actually disbanded in 2012, I remember hearing that on the news, and I was obviously a lot younger than now. I think I was just getting out of high school, and I was sitting back. I was like, oh shit, like The stereos, man. Like
I know, man.
all my friends were into different music. So when I said the
Yeah,
stereos broke up, they're like, okay, I don't care. And I'm like, dude, you don't get it, dude. Like this
I'm sorry.
band is lit as fuck. Like you don't understand. And he's like, they'll
Yeah,
come back. Most bands do. And I gotta say, as an adult, I'm super glad just to be able to say that the stereos are back, man. I'm really looking
hell
forward
yeah,
to
man.
what is next to come from you guys.
Hell yeah, dude. And it's gonna be good times coming up too. Like nothing like Pat's an incredible songwriter and the stuff I've been hearing is awesome. I keep feeding him cool influences. We just took some super sick new photos. I'm excited to show everyone. We're working on a lot of cool stuff. It's like we'll never abandon this baby again, and it's gonna be super fun to see how it evolves.
And also, November 4th of 2022, you guys actually released your most recent album titled Cheap Thrills. I was wondering if you can actually tell us a little bit more about this most recently released project. And of course, where can we actually snag ourselves a copy of it today?
Hell yeah. So like the game has changed since we had like pure volume MySpace music and physical CD copies back in the day. We don't have that now. So we're Spotify and we're Apple Music, or like all your streaming platforms will have it as well. We put out a lot of extra content on YouTube. And Pat is secretly actually a very funny guy and is the brain behind our TikToks. Our TikTok always has cool content on it as well. Cheap Thrills is the album we just put out last November, and then we played the El Macombo and sold it out in Toronto, like that iconic venue. And that album, it's by far my favorite. We have country vibes just from us being out in the West. We have some '80s new wave in there. We have EDM. We have everything, and it's Pat really showcases how incredible he is at singing too. And Miles and I get to up the guitar game in it, and I just love it. I love it so much. I think it represents us perfectly for where we were even last year. But even the new things I'm hearing, it's even more evolved since then. But the one thing it always will be is that it'll always be pop music, however you want to define that. It'll be sing alongable and catchy, and there's no rules of what genres we won't put together because we'll mash anything up. That's just what we are.
And also, as well, leading into this year of 2023, I also saw that you guys actually participated in an all-star recording of Serena Ryder's single, What I Wouldn't Do, that was actually released as a charity for Kids Help Phone with dozens of other artists. I was wondering if you
Yeah.
can actually tell us a bit more about that. And of course, what was it like just being in the studio and putting together this amazing mashup?
Yeah, hell yeah. So the fun part about being the guitar player is that I don't get to be a part of those things. So 10 years ago, when Pat did it with the waving flag for young artists for Haiti, he got to be in that with like, and he's repping stereos and he's our leader, he's our captain. So it was cool. So when we knew this one was coming up, he went out there and did it, and he told me it felt just like the old days. It was awesome to be a part of, and again, it was doing something for like Kids Help Phone. Like we care about that stuff so much, and I'm a big advocate of mental health, and just anything we can do for that, we will do. And he did an incredible job in it, and it's cool to see him before like it plays before movies again, and it's just awesome. So it just, and again, Serena Ryder's incredible. The other names on there are incredible, and it just to even be in these conversations with these artists still and have this long of a career is like it just is the best feeling ever.
And I do know as well that this song actually was playing, like you said, at the movies, at the Cineplex. I remember actually, I forget what movie it was, but I think it was about like 3-4 months ago, maybe. I saw this playing on the screen, and I saw Pat, and I was like,
Yeah.
"Is that Pat from the Stereos?" So like,
Dude,
I went to
without
see
the
another
hair.
movie. I went to see another movie the next week, and I was like, "Okay, I'm gonna watch this and make sure I'm seeing what I'm seeing." And then I was like, "That is." I'm like, "That's cool." It was filled with
Yeah,
so many
man.
amazing Canadian artists, though, as well.
Big time. Yeah, big time. And like that's another thing that's changed too. It's just we're everywhere, right? And say what you will about Spotify and just how like I guess digital the game has gone. It gives everybody a chance to create, and that's a cool thing because Canadians are badass, and we just have so much art to get out there, and we're just unique and cool.
And when you said as well, because obviously when you guys were actually like doing like the debut album and the Juno Awards, everything was a very like physical CD. It was all about music, record labels still at that time. I think like you were still buying ringtones and whatnot.
Yeah,
Obviously, when you guys came back as well, just in 2009, like was it hard for you guys to really adapt to the way the music industry is? Because it's crazy to think that it was really only 7 years, but so much changed in those 7 years. It's ridiculous.
Man, it has taken a lot of catching up to do. Luckily for me, working with like young athletes over all the years, I'm always like up to date on what the cool shit is, what the kids care about. But it is a different game. It is, and there was absolutely some adjustments that we had to take, because if you think about, what our track record was, we're pretty used to having some pretty good success with everything, and it's just we're building it up a different way. We're building it up with really connecting with the fan base, without having a vehicle like Much Music. And it is out without, the only thing that's exactly the same is playing the show. Everything else is completely different. I like it. It gives you something to learn, and it's a new thing. I like seeing the younger generation come in. They're even like they're pushing the boundaries farther, but it definitely caught me off guard a little bit. And especially because just getting a song on the radio again was huge for us, and then COVID took it away. But I mean, a lot of people had a way worse experience than that.
And also, I have to ask, because obviously, we only touch base on, like, I would say about 10% of your career in stereos. I know if we actually sat here and talked about everything, we'd probably be into the wee hours of the early morning. But I have to ask, what is next for yourself, Rob, and of course the rest of stereos? Because I do know you guys are working on other material that you probably can't release too much info of right now. But from what you are allowed to talk about, what's next for yourself and the rest of the stereos?
Yeah, so we just got back from the Indie Awards out there, which again, it was super cool. We were in a category for I think duo or group of the year, but we were Broken Social Scene was in it. Tegan and Sarah won, awesome. And again, just being with those names was huge. So Pat and I just got back. A couple of the guys stayed out in Ontario. We're back out west here. I know Pat's writing every day. We are looking at getting some tours going here sooner than later. We're playing, we're the headliner for Pride in Edmonton, which is a big deal to us too. So some festivals, try to get on some of that, get some more music out ASAP. But the big thing will be, getting across Canada again. And, the life that we all live is just kind of, Pat and I out here, our days are based, like I wake up, I go to the gym, I train some clients just to balance myself out from music world and sports world. And then it's, I literally come home, practice singing guitar, and it's been that way for my whole life now. I do some modeling stuff on the side too. And yeah, always for a good cause, and always just, spreading love, man. Bringing the people together.
And I have to ask, well, Rob, obviously I know how to follow you and, of course, the stereos on social media. But for the individuals that are not very social media savvy, or might actually, haven't been on social media for a while, how can they go about following not only yourself, but of course the rest of the stereos as well?
Yeah, hell yeah. So, I mean, I've been on Instagram for so long now. I feel like it's almost in everyone's life, but at my name, all of our branding is pretty much at We Are Stereos, or Stereos, but I feel like it's still a relative enough name that if you search it, the links will be there. But we have it on YouTube, where you'll get all the videos, you'll get some of the old live performances, some of the newer stuff. But we really like to run everything through our Spotify, our Apple Music, our platforms there, and our TikTok. Our TikTok is like, that's one of the things we had to learn, and I feel like we're getting good at it. It's all Pat, and he's a funny guy. And we all have our own personal things. They'll all be connected from our main Instagram, which we just got verified, which we're excited about too. Took way too long for a band like us to get that. And yeah, it's all there, man.
And I'm going to say first and foremost, Rob, before we part ways here this evening, I know I told you this before we actually went live, but I got to say thank you so much, man, for years of amazing music. I know I can speak for a lot of the Stereos fans that, your music definitely helped inspire and influence and just helped a lot of us fans through a lot of times, man. I first picked up your album when I was just a preteen. Now I'm a grown man interviewing a member of the Stereos. If only if only my little ass back in the day could actually to comprehend this moment. But I still listen to your guys' music today. So thank you so much, man, for amazing music that I had the opportunity to not only grow up on, but also listen to when I'm down, happy, or just want to party.
And man, honestly, okay, and that's what Stereos is. When you're down, happy, or just want to party. That's a great tagline. It's ours now. But honestly, man, that means the world to us. Like we were chatting before, music has saved my life on more than one occasion on different decades of my life. And that's why it'll save the world as well. And thank you for having platforms like this where we can get on and talk about it, man. Because like this is all I ever feel like talking about.
Hey, I gotta say, you are most certainly welcome. I gotta say, Rob, thank you so much for this amazing interview. And of course, anytime you guys want to come back on, you always have a
Oh
home
yeah,
here on 99.9 Punk World Radio FM. We play your music already, so obviously you guys are welcome to come on for an interview at any time.
great, man. I appreciate it so much.
Hey, you're most certainly welcome, Rob. Definitely have yourself an amazing night out there in Edmonton. And I'm pretty sure we definitely shall talk again soon. But for now, have yourself an amazing night.
You too, brother. Good night.